Ladies and gentlemen, SookyMMA is back for 2022, and it's a new year. We're excited for fights just like every other fight fan on the planet right now, and frankly, we destroyed last year, ended it on the most perfect note with an 11-2 pick'em record on the Dawkins Lewis card. So needless to say, we're riding a bit of a high. We even decided to throw up a couple NFL props on her Instagram profile for the last week of NFL regular season, and both of those hit. So if you hit Cooper Kupp over 116.5 yards and Mark Andrews over 69.5 receiving yards for week 18, congratulations. We kept the mojo going from the end of the UFC season, and now we're going to keep it going with 2022 underway. And Kattar versus Giga next up. Probably the appetizer leading into next weekend with the Ngannou and Gane fight. Woo! Very excited for that one. But let's quickly just recap. I mean, overall, 390, 224, and 5. We went 140, 62, and 2 on our last 17 UFC cards, and 62, 24, and 1 on the last 17 main cards. And guys, the run we had with the Super Saiyan pick towards the end, Cub Swanson, thank you for the love, but 16 and 10 overall, 11 and 5 in our last 16. So if you've been hopping on the boat with me for that Super Saiyan pick, you've been cashing. We're sitting pretty nice right now. So without further ado, we can hop right into UFC Vegas, Kattar versus Giga. And to be honest, TJ Brown versus Charles Rosa will likely kick the card off. And for me, Rosa on less than 5 days' notice. TJ Brown looking probably in the best shape he's ever looked at the weigh-ins. I think that the work has been put in. I think for me, and you look at Rose's last fight, I think his grappling was very underrated against Jackson. We hit the over on that one. I think that this is a case where you're just going to see two guys really go at it for 3 rounds. A part of me really does like the over here. I think it's going to be tough for either guy to finish, and I have TJ as about minus 160 favorite because I love guessing the lines, and we're going to keep that going. So let's take a look here. I mean, TJ Brown opened as a 285, but now coming down to 210, 220. Rosa, an easy dog, but now under that plus 200 range at plus 180, so you got to love that for him. But it's going to be a tough fight, especially with that short notice aspect to it all. But moving on, we've got Kevin Croom and Brian Kelleher. Now, this is a fight that I absolutely love, and for me, it stands out as 2 things. You know, I love the Kelleher hooks and that guillotine, but Kevin Croom is going to keep pushing the pace. He's got the cardio. He's got the grappling defense, too, where I think he can keep himself in this fight. And it's just that pace, right? I'm curious to see if Kelleher can just be so offensive in a fight like this, where even a Ricky Simone who pushed, forward quite a bit with obviously a wrestling-based background. But I think that's an area where Croom's going to find a lot of success. And so I have him as a favorite here. You know, you think about Kelleher's career in 2020 and how crazy that was, a lot of action. And then 2021, he went 1-1. And so for me, it's like find those areas to pick your shots, get those power shots, and if you can try and go for some work up against the fence and get some, control time on top, and even work for some of those, top mount type guillotines and roll over if you want to your back in the safest position, sure, take a shot. But I think this is going to be one where he's definitely fighting from his back. So I got Croom about a minus 140 favorite, as mentioned. And so let's take a look. I mean, this one's completely the opposite way. Brian Kelleher, minus 283 opener, now a minus 325 favorite. He is the overall more experienced and better MMA athlete, but Croom's got a game plan here where I think he might be able to show off a little bit. And the big thing for me is just if he's responsible, I think he has a lot to prove here. So that one's a little off. We'll rub that one off of our chest a little bit. But this next fight has me really intrigued. Court McKee versus Ramiz Brahimaj. And I think that this is one where Court McKee is going to be severely underrated. You talk about the experience he has under his belt. You talk about, his last, 5 years. I mean, the losses are to Saunders, Lima, Condit. And he's even taken on guys like Sean Brady and Sean Strickland, who are probably in the 170 and 185 shortlist for title shots. So he's taken on the right competition. And for me, Brahimaj, you look at the fights. The Max Griffin fight just always stands out because He's rarely been to a third round, and Max Griffin took him there in a very violent way. He used his footwork, he used his jab to really beat him up, and I think in that sense, Ramiz was just not able to find any timing for his takedowns. And I think if Court McGee is able to use some of his strength, he's going to have a good size advantage here. I think that he's going to be able to do a lot of damage on the feet and also not be so susceptible to the grappling. I think when you look at the early part of Court McGee's career, we saw him put on a grappling clinic on his come up in the UFC. So I really like Court McGee's chances in this fight. I do think that Brahimaj is going to get the odds in terms of favorite. So let's take a look. I have him about a -140, but I'm leaning Court McGee to win the fight. Court McGee, -120 opener, now getting some places giving you plus money, but that's pretty much a pick 'em, and I'm leaning Court McGee in a heavyweight, so that's probably a bet and a confirmed pick 'em as well. And ending off the prelims, this is a big fight that I'm really interested in. Joseph Holmes, you know, a lot of guys in Glory Kickboxing that are going to be showing off a little bit in these prelims, and Jamie Pickett for me is the guy you just don't know which one you're going to get when you see him fight. You know, he's that same guy that beat Staropoli. He's the same guy that lost to Nchukwu and Jordan Wright. And for me, Jordan Wright is just one of those guys where I think he's very fringe as a complete MMA athlete at the UFC level. And Tafon Nchukwu just has a lot of cardio questions that, for me, it was interesting to see Jamie Pickett lose both of those kinds of fights. And in this case, you know, Joseph Holmes, you look at some of his highlight reels. I loved when you look at the Joseph Padi knockout. I mean, that's a one step, another punch. So he never takes his eyes off the target. He set up his combo very well. For me right now, the poise that I'm seeing from him, the calmness, we're going to get into a guy like Brandon Royval who's showing that as well. That's what makes a really, you know, good fighter to me. I like seeing that kind of energy. It kind of scares me a little bit. And I think that's where I'm really leaning towards Holmes in this fight, despite, you know, being in the position that he's in, going up against a guy like Jamie Pickett, who should be considered a UFC veteran. So I got Pickett at about a -170 here based on experience, recency bias in some ways. You know, he just came off the win, but I do like Holmes in this fight. So let's take a look here. Joseph Holmes, -175 favorite and now coming down. So I see a lot of value in that live line of -140, -150. You can take it. I mean, I'm probably going to bet on that one too. So two confirmed bets for me right now are Court McGee and Joseph Holmes. Jamie Pickett a little bit above that +110, +120 range. I just don't see the value in taking him as a better. And I think even as a pick, I'm just going to take my chances with Holmes putting on a nice show with, you know, the potential to see what he can do for 3 rounds. Next up, we've got main card action. Bill Algeo and Joannis Brito. Now, for me, I'm already going to say I love Brito in this fight. You look at his Contender Series 1, you know, shootbox style. They've got that forward progress. They got the power punching. They like to attack the body with the strikes, but they also have that crazy wrestling, grappling that kind of complements their fast-paced approach on the feet. So for me, I really like what he brings to the table, because when you look at the ways that fighters who have been able to dominate Bill Algeo have done it, I mean, this is the style of fighter you want to be. The ability to take the fight to the ground, the ability to take a couple of shots on the feet and throw for power. You look at the Ricardo Ramos fight. You know, the Spike Carlisle one, where you want to give Bill Algeo the most credit, is one where he kind of took on the meteor guy who's going to take, you know, a lot of his energy out in the first half to the first 2 rounds of the fight, and then you can kind of slowly take over. Bill Algeo is really into that style of fighting where you're just going to keep going and use the survival of the fittest. Whereas with guys like this who bring the power, bring the mix of the ground game versus the striking, I think that's where he struggles the most. And for me, Brito looks like an absolute beautiful bet. I have Bill Algeo as about a -120 favorite here. I just think that he should have some bump as being the guy that we've watched a little bit in the UFC, despite some of the, you know, lack of success we've seen. We've also seen him do some great things even in that fight against Ricardo Ramos. So let's go with Algeo as a -120. But again, we seem to be leaning towards what we think is a dog right now. So let's take a look at that line. Brito opening as the favorite and actually growing more. Algeo +105 opener, now as high as a +130. So, I mean, we've got the right leans, but we're way off with the lines. And so that's a great sign for some of our picks. So let's keep rolling. Dakota Bush and Vyacheslav Borshev. Now, this is one of the most interesting fights in the card, because we saw a version of Dakota Bush that was very much short notice. He tried his best to go for broke in the early parts of the fight, you know, given how short notice it was, but it didn't come up in his favor. Now, Austin Hubbard as a debut UFC fight is also pretty respectable. Now, you talk about Borshev's really, you know, highlight reel performance on Dana White Contender Series, that step back counter punch, which just absolutely ended the fight. Those are the things that we're going to want to see from both guys. I think Bush has great highlight reels on his own accord in terms of being able to use his power, use his boxing, and just good combos, looks for openings, takes his time, and that's where I want to see where both these guys line up. I think that if this goes deep, I really want to see what these guys can do in the later rounds, but honestly, even an under here with some guys getting a little, irresponsible could be something to look at. But for me, I think Borshev's going to be a favorite here. Probably a minus 150, minus 160. I could be way off there, but I really like the stuff I see from Bush on a full camp in general, and now we're talking about a guy who's taken this camp probably the most seriously of any camp he's been in, and is coming in as a borderline brand new fighter. So for me, the 4-inch reach advantage, the coming out of the Kraus camp that's really starting to find its footing, and then also just really putting in the work. I think for me, I think there's a chance for an upset there. So Borshev minus 150, but I have a lean on Dakota Bush a bit. So let's see. There we go. Minus 200 opener for Borshev. I respect the line. Now about a minus 190, minus 180. But Bush, plus 170, now comfortably being plus 150, plus 160. Guys, I'm loving some of these dogs right now, or guys I think are dogs. So we're going to have to ride a few of them. Katlyn Chikadze, Jennifer Maia, again. I can see Katlyn being extremely favored in this fight, but let's break down the first fight very quickly. I think that you saw the version of Jennifer Maia that you wanted to see all fight in the third round. She won that third round, and there were two instances. One where she took the fight up against the fence, defended fairly well, but was able to do a bit of damage, put Katlyn a bit more on her back foot, have her worried a little bit. Then the second time she did the same thing, it was a clean-cut, perfect takedown, and was able to dominate quite a bit till the bell. So 29-28 finish, very dominant looking 2 rounds for Katlyn in some ways, but, towards the end of that second, you can even see as they were slowing down, Jennifer Maia was able to land. So I think that from a game plan fight IQ perspective, that was a bit of an off fight for Jennifer Maia, because you look at her run after that, she's taken on the Shevchenkos after beating Calderwoods. That's where I want to see Maia right now. I think that with the same game plan that she had in that third round, all fight, she should be able to do a lot more damage here. You can't be willing to just step into that technical striking range of Katlyn Chikadze to just hope for the best. It's the one area she's constantly focusing on and clearly getting so much better. Cynthia Calvillo learned that in a very hard way, especially being such a smaller fighter. So for me, Maia, with that ferociousness and pushing forward, she even landed a takedown on Valentina Shevchenko, which is going to be one of the claims to fame for her for the rest of her career. But for me, I really want to see her do a bit more of that, mixing it up, changing levels, putting Katlyn on her back foot, because any time that Katlyn's been in that position, a little bit less confident. But if you allow her to set up her strikes, start to throw good combos, she is looking more and more crisp, and that's where fighters are losing big rounds to her. So for me, Katlyn Chukagyan, minus 140 favorite. But hey, if Jennifer Maia, I know I picked her the last time based on game plan, she let me down, but I really think if you watch that fight, both as a coach, as a fan, as a pundit, as an analyst, whatever you want to call it, there's a very clear-cut path to victory for Jennifer Maia, and it would make sense for her to take it from the very start of the fight as opposed to just seeing it in the third round. So let's take a look here. Bing, bang, boom. Minus 145 for Katlyn as an opener, but she's climbing as high as a minus 200 right now. So I'm probably going to lay some of that juice on Jennifer Maia. And honestly, I might have to take her in the pick'em as well. I do see some betting value there, especially as high as plus 180 in some places. But you look at the tape, you look at what she can do against a fighter like Katlyn Chukagyan, and I think there's an opportunity there for her to perform. That's where I see it. My fight of the night next. Brandon Royval versus Rogerio Bontorin. Now, I really have to give Royval not only the favorite touch here, but I think this is going to be an extremely exciting fight for him. This is one where he's on a card where there's not too many people that are, creating a lot of excitement for this card, but those are the cards where you kind of take a name, whoever performs really, really well, and I think this is his best opportunity. Rogerio Bontorin, I thought, was always one of those more underrated fighters in the UFC, but he's never taken advantage of the steps to get to the next level. The Kai Kara France fight is a great example. The Paivas of the world, the Matt Schnells of the world, he's able to deal with those pretty handedly, but you look at some of these other fights and it becomes a bit tougher for him, and I like Royval to finish this fight. I think that his ability to really force you into chaotic areas is one of his best qualities, because he seems to be a level above above you. Kai Kara-France has become a next level fighter after fighting Royval. And for me, you look at the way Kai Kara-France beat Rogerio Bontorin, not that I think this is going to be something similar, but I also give Royval such good credit on the ground where I don't think he's going to end up in those positions where he might get tapped so quickly. I think that the injuries and stuff like that are what make me the most scared for him, but as an overall athlete, the poise, the athleticism, the length, the way he fights is just so dangerous that I think he's going to put Bontorin in a lot of bad positions where if Bontorin's not literally in the most elite form, he could find himself in dangerous places a lot more than he thinks. And that's where it's like, you know, the grinding style, find the takedowns, box him up a little bit when you can. That is Bontorin's style, but if Royval doesn't give you those opportunities based on his footwork and his ability to just get in and out and shoot for takedowns and just keep moving, I think that's what's going to make this fight so tough. So I got Royval as a minus 200, but like I said, as a pick, I got him to finish this fight. I really think he can do it. So let's take a look here. And I mean, we missed some value there. It opened as a complete pick'em, and now we're seeing Royval now get as high as a minus 170, with Bontorin getting close to that plus 140 range on average. So I think we break down that fight pretty well, and you can see me definitely considering Royval as a finisher here because I can see the value in this fight going to the distance being pretty high. Jay Collier and Chase Sherman. Now, this is one where you want to make that joke, oh, y'all look alike. I mean, damn, these two are the two white boys that I could probably get confused on a bad day. So, for me, I just lean Chase Sherman here. I think he's the better athlete. I think the competition over the years is much, much, much better. And you see some of the things in the most recent fights, like the Arlovsky fight, you know, there were openings there, but Arlovsky's elite when it comes to matching his partner's footwork and being able to find his own openings. And then you look at the Collier fights, I mean, Gian Villante win is like kind of that notch on your belt to like stay in the UFC. But then you got that split decision against a guy like Carlos Felipe. Now, it's those things that make me kind of really excited for Jay Collier, because if he can get into those areas where it's just a lot of dirty boxing and filling them in tight spots and getting to that body, he might have a good chance against Chase Sherman. But both these guys have fairly good chins. They've been finished, but I mean, on average, they can take a good punch. And I think Chase Sherman's going to show a lot more technical suave in this fight, and I think he's going to be able to attack a little bit more from a distance, whereas, you know, Collier's going to be looking to go in a bit more, use those leg kicks. Both of these guys have pretty good, you know, attacks for heavyweights in the size that they are at multiple levels, so it makes me excited to see that. At the end of the day, I really think this one's a coin flip. I lean Chase Sherman, like I said, experience and athleticism, so let's take a look. I mean, there you go. Opened as a pick'em. Now you got Chase Sherman now hovering close to that plus 120, plus 110 range, and Jay Collier going up as high as a minus 140. So that one is definitely one of the tougher fights to call on this card. And I mean, with that said, let's get right into that main event here. Giga Chikadze and Calvin Kattar. Now, I've been a Giga backer from the very beginning. You hear a lot of people right now saying like, oh, I wasn't such a believer in the beginning, but he's starting to grow on me. But hey, listen, you look back at the history of this Georgian fighter influx that we've seen. Giga Chikadze, despite that questionable Dana White Contender Series performance, was the leader of the pack. There's no question for me that, especially, you know, outside of these Merab Dvalishvili and all of these like big names that are starting to grow, you know, the Topurias came up out of that, and once he joined King's MMA, I think that we're seeing an exponentially growing Giga Chikadze with every fight. Athletically is the big thing for me because he is smart as hell in there, and he is technical as beep. That's where you always saw him as good, but the cardio, the athleticism, you know, even the competition from an MMA perspective, has he seen all those looks? Now, with King's MMA, he's got some great training partners to give him incredible looks, especially from a bigger size, you know, the head middleweights and stuff over there. So I really like that part of his game, and that's where you're seeing him grow, and that's why I was such a big fan. Heartbreaking to see him beat, you know, Cub the way that he did, but again, that Giga kick is no joke, and that high guard of Calvin Kattar's, that boxing style in MMA, is the one thing that scares me here. He can take a beating like nobody else. If this fight goes past 2 or 3 rounds, I think that Calvin Kattar is a live dog after taking an absolute pummeling. If that's the way this fight goes, he's going to look for his boxing openings. He's got a wrestling background that I expect him to try and utilize if things are not going his way, because Giga Chikadze's number one question is the cardio. So Calvin Kattar, he's got the durability, he's got the heart, he's got the background in wrestling to try and make this a very real grinder fight, as opposed to just taking these shots and trying to push forward to find his own. That's where I think he's not going to get that much credit. So Giga Chikadze, minus 170, minus 180 favorite. He deserves it, undefeated in the UFC, but still always, you know, coming with the questions that he does. And then Kattar, year off, took the time that he needed after such a beating, but I really think that Giga deserves that line. So let's take a look here. Oh, damn. Giga's been over minus 200 the whole time. So minus 218 opener. Now about a minus 230 across the board. Kattar hasn't moved that much. Plus 180 opener. Now about a plus 170 to a plus 190 all over the place. So obviously a big underdog. A lot to prove after the fight that he just had. So you can see that in the Vegas line. For me, I don't even know right now. I got about 2 hours to decide on that final pick. Always check Instagram and Twitter from now on for those final picks in terms of a pick'em. We're going to be on Verdict MMA, so we'll get those up on Twitter and Instagram as well. Full videos will always be on YouTube. We'll get some clips up on Instagram for those, little advertisements, if you will, to keep the ball rolling here. But such a good time. Very excited for 2022. Can't believe how well we did in 2021. So we're going to ride that train into the sunset. Keep it locked to SookyMMA. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for your time. Peace.